Thank you, Karen, for organizing this conversation in conjunction with Tom's show. Uh, I just wanted, before we get to the slides and some conversation, just a few words of introduction. Born in 1957, Tom attended Hebron Academy here in Maine, and then the Rhode Island School of Design. Graduating in 1981 with a BFA, he attended grad school at Yale, but didn't like the academic aspects of it and left. He went on to earn a master's from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst in 1987. In 1995, his wife, the writer Kimberly Ridley, was offered the editorship of a new magazine called Hope, published by Wooden Boat magazine in Brooklin, Maine. And she and Tom subsequently moved to Maine. And the rest is, as they say, art history. I've known Tom and Kim for many years now. Nearly 10 years ago, I met up with them at Cleonese. Some of you may remember, a wonderful restaurant in downtown Ellsworth, to discuss writing an essay on Tom's life and work for what became this book. I'm going to hold it up here, called Island. Maybe it comes up backwards, I don't know. Paintings by Tom Curry. At the time, he had painted, I think, more than 40 images of Chatto Island. I think the total now is a little bit over 60. So we might start our conversation with a Chatto painting, which you see before you, and the question, what is it about this island that has drawn you to it for nearly 25 years, Tom?
Well, when I first moved to Maine, this was our view down at the water.
Ooh.
And so it used to be an island for me. I mean, when I first moved to Maine, I looked at this island like as a reference because oftentimes I would go out to do landscape and I didn't know where I was. Where's north? Where's south? Where's the wind coming from? But whenever I looked at this island, I would see, okay, it's coming from the northeast, it's coming from the southwest, and the tide is going out. So I would get a reference, like it's almost like a little compass for me.
Mm.
And then I started a series of pastels of this island. And I brought all my stuff down to the water and I started like studying it, and I started putting it into this sort of 1/3 and 2/3 sky sort of composition.
Yep.
And then I switched to paint because I found that I could do more with paint than pastel. And so that's why I started this painting of the series of the island. Another part of it was, this may sound silly, but to some people, but for some reason or other, I had a strange fear of the water. And I wanted to sort of work through my fear of the water by doing paintings of the water and the island.
Yeah. So how far is that island from your studio? Could you just walk out to it? Or?
I could walk out to it, probably take me 20 minutes to walk out to this view.
Right. And you keep going back to it time and again, all year round?
I think what I've learned is in the winter, when you have the ice along the edge of the water, to be more cautious. You could easily slide into the sea.
That would not be good.
I think what happens is that I spend a lot of time looking at things outside, a lot of color, and study the sky, and I look at phosphorescence in the water and all types of things that are affecting our area, the landscape, and they intermingle with what I see when I go visit the island, and then that becomes a painting over a period of time.
So I know you work from drawings and some photographs, but that you really depend on your memory as far as...
Right. I think, but going back to this part of this idea of, you see something for the first time and you say, oh my gosh, I want to incorporate that into a composition. Like the thaw in February, like Kim and I skiing, and we could see the green water, the zooplankton doing their thing. And I wanted to include that in a painting. So in this particular painting, I'm fascinated by this idea of the island floating. it actually seems to be floating in the sky. I mean, obviously an island never floats, but the idea of it in total reflection, it's very calming. And that's what fascinates me about it.
Yes. I think you also said at some point that it's almost like the island is almost like a mediating point between the water and the sky. Sort
Yeah,
of.
it's also, if you think about the composition, it's inviting the viewer in a way that's kind of like a stage, you know?
Mm,
I mean, you have all the elements. You have the sky and the water and the land, and how do they all relate? And my wife used to call them mandalas, you know, they're sort of like a meditative view,
oh, yeah.
vantage point. And I think about them as being in some way prayers, you know, because you're looking at this thing that's always changing. It's never 2 days the same. And those are the parts that fascinate me most about this particular view.
Yeah, wonderful. You want to go on to the next one?
Here we go. All right, how about that?
Yeah. Where did the island go?
I know, exactly. I think that this idea of gradients with the color transitions is something, it is so subtle. And if you spend time looking at being out on the water and looking at the sky at dusk or at dawn, you start to see these subtle changes in the sky and the water. And when I'm teaching students how to see color, I often have them turn their heads to the side and start to look at the variations of color. And it helps to really see it more clearly than if you're just like, you know, painting. These pieces have more of a Japanese feeling to me. They have like a subtlety, and this just like this, almost like a window of light, you know, like being opened. And I'm very fascinated with this idea of starting with certain colors at the beginning of the horizon line and then fading them out and then bringing them back. And something like this is about 65 to 70 colors pre-mixed and then put together. And then what happens is I've been using a palette knife for each level, maybe a ½ inch, ½ inch. And then after that palette knife is through, then I very gently bring the palette knife back and blend the two, clean my palette, and then add the next color. So it's just like, it's a long process, but I love the feeling of the light.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think in my text for your catalog, I mentioned that, you know, this is very new, a new view of the island for you. And I was sort of connecting it to where we are in the world right now. I mean, it's sort of like the islands almost feels like it's disappearing. You know, like this, it sort of reflects where we are.
I think that's true. I think that you know, as artists and just as writers and all creative people and people who have been living through this last 4 months, there are certainly some dark parts, and the feeling of who you are and what you're doing. You're not really trapped in your studio. It's a blessing to be in a studio. The idea of, what can I do with this? How can I make it a little bit different? How can I soften it? And so this is really almost a very sort of a gentle submersion of this island, almost like in water. The whole thing, even the sky feels like it's in water. So this softening is something I was playing with. The other thing was, I kept making the island darker and darker and darker. Stormy skies, and there's only so much dark you can take. So
Yeah.
I started lightening up a bit, and this is one of the compositions that's bringing more light into it. And if we go through this further slides, I'll show you another composition that sort of culminates in that feeling of light.
Yeah,
Before we move on, I just want to know if people can see in the screen behind me, that's the painting hanging over the fireplace. The painting that we're talking about now called Mist. So just gonna duck so everybody can see.
Okay, sounds good. I'll be there.
Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
Tom, I was rereading Terry Tempest Williams' wonderful appreciation of your work from the Islands book, and I had not really seen this paragraph before, or hadn't noticed it, but it seems so apropos to where we are right now. She writes, I don't know what keeps the artist returning to his easel day after day, or the writer to her desk, when despair creeps in and threatens to quell the imagination, the source of our deepest hope as human beings, to evoke what we can never say, to honor what we can never know, and to illuminate what we can only feel, is the truest rendering of our soul's work. I think it just seems so apropos where we are now. That, as you say, it's not a problem to be stuck in your studio, but when you go to the easel and consider your next painting and where the world is at now, does that influence your vision? Does it?
I think you know what, the thing that that's happening with the world now is connecting us. We're starting to appreciate all the things that we took for granted 4 or 5 months ago. You know, this idea of connection with people, community, reaching out to people who are in trouble, but also reflecting work that gives people hope and maybe opens people's eyes to the fact I spent so much time out walking since this COVID. My wife and I just walk and tramp around and look at new places, and it's the one place we can be outside when we're outside, to breathe so freely. I think the world around us is just offering this beauty, this awe all the time, and we just have to take the time to listen, take the time to enjoy it.
Yeah, the breathing is so important.
Breathing's
seriously good. That's something that we're all thinking about right now. Do you want to go on to the next one, Karen? Whoa.
What's he gonna say, man?
So Tom, I think I mentioned to you that I was talking to one of your fellow painters, Sarah Farragher, a while back, and I was saying how great it would be to have a show of artists who do clouds. And I mentioned her and Bill Irvin, but she immediately said, "Oh, Tom's clouds! Oh my God!" So I'm just curious, how do you handle the clouds? Are they based on actual clouds, or are you abstracting, or?
Absolutely. You know what? When I started working with pastel, you have to put the clouds down pretty quickly. I think it's actually quite, I know this is going to sound simple. If you just break the clouds down into light, medium, and dark, and some reflective light, and you just put that in your head, and you start on the right side of your picture, and you just boom, 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 and you can put the things together very quickly. Uh-oh, cat's out of control. And I think that it's, something like this is, I have a study that I do 16 by 20 of the clouds on location, and boom, boom, boom. And I use the palette knife, and I put the whole thing together. And then what I do is I go back to references and open it up a little bit more and see a little bit more detail, and obviously do some reflection in Photoshop where, you do a flip and figure out what's going on. And so the main thing is, I know Neil Welliver worked on a lot of small pieces and then brought pieces up to larger sizes. And I think that I also seen Phil Fry do that. And Alex Katz used to work very small to blow those massive pieces up. So I think in some ways it's a way to simplify your composition because it's, you know, smaller. And then how do you want to manipulate it when you work on a larger size? But the main thing is that you're trying to keep it alive. You know, you don't want to be like, yeah, let's get it into bigger size. It's not like it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. But there's so much energy to those clouds. And
well,
I love the way that one in the upper left kind of comes in.
Yeah, it's
fill the corner.
Yeah, the shapes. I mean, I spent so much time looking at clouds. And my wife used to say, well, I know, when we used to get prints back from double prints of, you know, remember how I used to get double prints of a 36 millimeter
Sure.
camera? And then we'd have double prints of all these cloud pictures. And she was like, no. So, you know, they stacked up, and that became a really great reference, you know, before digital cameras and screens.
Yeah. I actually posted a photo of clouds that I had taken from the dock on Echo Lake the other day on Facebook, because I was sure that there was a face in it. And I got about 120 replies of different things that people saw: dogs, pigs, faces. And someone even chimed in that there's actually some kind of there's a word for seeing things in clouds. I mean, literally, there's a term for it, which I found fascinating.
Because it reminds me of the movie Amelie. Do you remember that little sequence where she's looking up at the sky and she sees a teddy bear and she sees...
Oh, right.
And you know what? I remember my parents taking us out and we'd be lying on the ground and just staring up at the sky looking for shapes.
Yeah.
It seems like such a nice thing to do. Pre-tick era.
Yeah. You told me that you do a lot of scraping and grinding and in preparation, you know, in developing these paintings. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think one of the things, there's a slide in here of underpainting, and
you want to get to that? Or?
Yeah, it will. It's going to be later in the projection, but I think that one of the things that I find challenging but interesting and fascinating is how many times you can sort of obliterate a painting and then come back. And I think that when you start off as a painter, there's this sort of tendency to be very careful. I don't want to go back, you know. I did this once. This is all I'm going to do once. And as you spend more time as an artist, painting, you start to realize that, you know, maybe 90% of the painting looks great, and there's this 10% that's a mistake, and you can't figure it out. So then you grind the whole thing off. And then you have your basic shapes, but then you just use a palette knife and bring back the shapes. And then I've been using like Scott towels. I dab the surface with a Scott towel, and that softens it. And so it's not so hard edged, and especially with clouds. So you're constantly trying to figure out how to do your edges, soften your edges where in some areas and harden your edges in others.
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's that whole process is a little bit like, you know, in writing is how much I love having an editor, a good editor.
Yeah.
You know, someone who is, you know, because I've done, you know, I've set it down. I'm sort of happy with it. And then the editor looks at it and goes, wow, what were you trying to say there? Or, you know, whatever. But it's you know, when it's obviously thoughtfully done, it's such a luxury to have.
All right. How many times is it a clear sailing through? Tell me the truth about it. How many times does it just all come together really quickly? Boom, boom, boom. And the writer and the editor loves it.
Yeah. So rare. So
It's
rare.
the same with painting.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
yeah, and I've had some editors who really have saved me from myself. I
uh-huh.
like to say, I mean, I tend to, I can be clever or, do some wordplay stuff, and they'll just say, no, Carl, we don't need that here. So, you want to go to the next slide? Ooh.
This is my ode to Bill Irvin.
And for those of you who don't know Bill Irvin's work.
I love his clouds. I mean, his clouds, you know what I mean? It's like he's using his elbows to paint with,
Yeah.
and all the different shapes. And I think the part of this that's fun is the playfulness of it. And I really think his work is just so genuine and so alive. And I just wanted to do something. I mean, I've seen this, haven't you? These crazy clouds. I mean, there's so much going on. And I decided to put a couple sailboats in to sort of soften it, give it a little, the race, to give it a little more animation.
Yeah, because you're right on Eggemoggin Reach there, right?
Yes.
Must be some major sailing going on.
Yes, and we've been out several times watching the race, and it is kind of a haphazard beginning. Everyone's up, moving around, and then they come up to the same time, and boom, out they go. And so there's this sort of like jockeying before they head off.
And then when they come back with the spinnakers out, wow, that's something to watch.
Exciting.
Yeah. And what, Bill, people have asked Bill, where did you find that cloud shape? And he claims that he's pretty much seen so many different shapes in the sky. And, and every once in a while you see something that's geometric or square or.
Oh my gosh. I think it's like a comedy, it's comical to see the different types of clouds are up there. And of course, that single cloud. The single cloud all the sky, and there's just one little funny little cloud. And like when I started teaching the workshop, I used to tell students, when I first started doing pastel, I only did everything within this square. This square is all I looked at. And then after a while, I realized, wait a second, this square over here is pretty cool. Look at that sky over there. I'm going to include that sky. And I'm going to use that water over there. And then I'm going to put these trees together. And this is going to be the picture. Because it's almost like you're in the whole place. You're not just in this little teeny area. You are 360, I mean, you are in the whole space. And so this idea of selection is so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like a composite that you're creating.
Sure. And you're also there for, a period of time. And everything changes in that period of time. So you're selecting things. Yeah. Usually what I do when I first start is the sky. I try to figure out what the sky is. If there's nothing going on in the sky, I wait until the clouds show up. But, I think that it's sort of like you sort of have to play it, You know what? Here's the thing that I found, it's kind of silly. It's like, oftentimes I would go, okay, now I'm going to go to this place. I'm going to get the water done. I'm going to go to that place and get the river done. And what I realized is you can't make lists when you're outside doing landscapes. Do you know that there's going to be like 10,000 black flies there? No, you don't. Or you know what I mean? It's like, or is it going to be super windy, or is it like traffic going by? I mean, you got to be sort of very flexible. And it's incredible how many people you run into when you're working outside.
Really?
Yeah.
Any close encounters you'd like to?
I've had people come up to me and say, "Can my husband stand next to you for a photograph?" Or I had some woman trying to give me Swiss fish, like in a little plastic baggie. You need these. You need them for nourishment. And I was just like, you just sort of have to, it's great for stories when I come home and Kim says, "What happened today?" So
yeah. You start out plein air, but you bring things back to the studio. Is that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said before, I usually always work with a smaller piece. on
Right.
location, and then
To
I
get-
bring it back to the studio and develop it. Now, this is the piece that I wanted to talk to you about, because this is the piece that is where I was making the sky darker and the water darker and the island was dark, and I couldn't set up the dynamics of the way I was feeling about what's going on now. And so obviously, like when I start the painting, everything's in complementary colors and the island was yellow, and I just left it yellow. And I started thinking, wow, this has a feeling of what my teacher, George Pappas, was talking about, where this idea of this light coming from within, you know? And so I felt like the island was almost breathing color, breathing this light. And I just love the way it sets off from the sky and the water. And I've seen this light, you know, when it's shearing behind you when you're painting, and it's just cutting across and it hits something, and it's just like, wow, you know, it happens like within, you know, 10 or 15 minutes, but it's still brilliant and bright.
Yeah, I think the Maine light has its own, the light in Maine has its own qualities. I mean, I know a wonderful poet, Rosanna Warren, who spent some time on Great Cranberry Island. She described the light in a Maine room being able to cut your hand on it. You know, it's so strong and sharp, and
Especially
but here here that you really get that sense of the, you know, that sudden illumination that happens, the raking of the light.
Yeah, I love this piece.
Yeah, wonderful.
You know, Carl and Tom, I just want to mention the book again, and there is a short part of a poem, I guess. It's at J.M. Coates. Is that how you say that, Carl? It's in the back of the book.
Cutsy. Mm-hmm.
Cutsy, yeah. I really like this one writing that he wrote about, I don't know if it was about Tom's work, but in this painting in particular, and the first one we saw, it really makes me think of Tom's work. So I'll read it to you. When you were talking about what we've been going through the past, 5 months with the COVID, that this is where this painting kind of makes sense in this writing. I stretched my arms and laid my palms on the earth. And yes, the rocking persisted, the rocking of the island as it sailed through the sea, and the night bearing into the future its freight of gulls and sparrows. And for me, that Tom's work, and that in conjunction with that one phrase, kind of summed up how everybody's feeling right now with what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very beautiful. I just wanted to share that.
Well, it reminds me too, that's one of the wonderful things about that book are the quotes that Tom and Kim found, the Rachel Carson and the other ones that are inserted here and there. They really are wonderful accompaniments to Tom's paintings. Do you want to go to the next one?
Sure.
Whoa.
This is again from that same series of obliteration.
Obliteration. Well, go ahead.
But in a soft way. I mean, like we've seen these guys, we've also seen the mist rising when you're on the water early in the morning. My parents bought a camp on Newfield Lake when I was a kid. And I would always get up really early before all of my sisters got up. I would walk down the dock and step into the canoe, and there'd be mist rising from the water. And the silence of that canoe going out, I always had my fishing pole. And I would, head out into it, and the light was just coming in. It was just like so beautiful, gorgeous. And this is what this reminds me of, those early morning lake canoe rides.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost mirage-like this time.
Yeah.
In the piece I wrote for the catalog, I mentioned that I really feel like this and the other one are really some of the most sort of contemporary paintings you've ever done. I mean, there's a little bit of color field in there. I mentioned op art, which I think is maybe going a little too far, but they were into those kind of vibrations of colors.
Hmm.
And I think the gradations, gradations and gradients that are going on here have some similarity to that.
Yeah, I'd like to spend, a year working with just this idea with several different types of colors, um, just because it's such a commitment to do a piece like this, and oftentimes when you do it, you get a phone call, and you're like, all right, wait a minute, did I mix that color? What did I put in there? Like,
Jeez.
and, and I'm not kidding. Something like this would take 2 or 3 tries, and it's usually nothing. I know friends who paint over the course of 3 years a single painting.
Mm.
Rob Shillity, great painter, and I was thinking about that. You're sort of like putting this together. It's sort of like the mist is rising. You're really mimicking it, and I find it almost like your eye keeps returning to this composition, especially this light.
Yeah, it's so ethereal. It's wonderful. Want to go to the next one?
Please. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh no, I don't know who this guy is. A bum.
Well, apropos this photo, Tom, maybe you could describe just a typical outing. Where are you here?
Oh my gosh. I am at Small Point Beach.
Oh, down by Phippsburg?
Yes, Phippsburg. And
Beautiful.
it's kind of like a private beach, you know?
Yep.
And oftentimes people ask, who are you and where are you staying? All this stuff. But it's a stunning beach that absolutely gets completely engulfed at high tide. There's nothing, it's just like it's gone.
Yeah.
And I'm looking down at the cliffs, and I did a 3 or 4 paintings in this area, and people came up to me and said, that's the one I want, and stuff like that, which was never happens.
Wow.
But it was just like it was beautiful early morning paintings because it's cooler. But this is a magnificent area to paint.
Yeah, I discovered that area. I stayed at the Small Point Inn a
Gosh.
couple of times, and what an amazingly beautiful part of Maine. But so in the picture, you've got a backpack, you've got a small folding.
See, that's actually a stool, but I wanted to keep my stuff close to me, a little closer. I used a French easel, but now I'm using a Gloucester easel. The French easels started falling apart. They stopped making them the way they would, maybe 50 years ago.
Okay.
And then I have a Gloucester easel, which is fantastic. It's very sturdy, and it's a little bit like unfolding a spider, if anybody sees you setting it up. But it can hold a big painting. So when I'm working with, like, say, 24 by 60, I can easily put it up and strap it in so the wind doesn't blow it off. And I've had it in my studio for years. I never even picked it up. I never even tried using it. And then I had to do this commission piece on the vertical, and I needed something other than an oak easel that I was using for that. And the Gloucester easel is fantastic. I highly recommend it.
Cool. So is that your palette in your hand there?
Yeah, I always have a small palette. It's probably about this big. Always have it. And then I'm kind of like, I use a lot of paint. Always use white in the center, and then I go warm colors to the right and cool colors to the left. And the thing is that when you're painting outside, especially like days like today, you could have your whole paint, all of your paint on your palette just go whoop, because it gets too warm, and it turns into milk. And so, it's just a matter of always. When I used to work with pastels, I used to hold the pastels in my hand, the left hand, and then pick them out and paint with my, draw with my right. And so it just became second nature to have the palette here and use a palette knife when you're working. It's just, The French easel has been great. I mean, I've used the French easel for 30, 35 years. But now have to move on because I'm working much bigger.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think you mentioned that you've been looking for certain paints. Some have not been satisfactory.
I mean,
I
I've
think
really had a hard time with paint coats drying.
But even the consistency, did you mention that? I can't remember what kind of paint it was that had little bits of stuff in it that.
Oh yeah, right. They had calcium carbonate or titanium that wasn't ground properly.
Right.
And it looked fine when you're painting it, everything in wet, and looked fantastic when it was. And then as it dried, these little teeny confetti pieces of paint all everywhere, and I can't tell you how frustrating that is. So I started buying Old Holland paint, and I haven't had that trouble with Old Holland. But I usually order it through Jackson's Art Supplies, like I don't get any money on this, but it's a good place to order paint, and they always have the paint I need. And I think that expanding your colors is sort of a luxury as you get older, but I really think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, those old Hollanders knew something about paint.
Yeah, it's like a solid paint, man. It's like a tooth, it's like, it's in a container that's easy to access. And of course you're throwing away your life savings buying it, but.
So this painting, where are we here?
This is Small Point again. This is actually the point that sticks out into the ocean for this point. And it's a place where my family summers. And it's just it's a gorgeous area. It just feels like the ocean is smashing around there,
Yeah, Small Point was actually the first place that John Marin painted when he first came to Maine. I don't know if you knew that he came to Small Point and
I saw. You know what? Yeah, I went to the house where he did the painting from.
Yeah.
And went to the second floor window and looked out at his view. Yeah, it's
he loved that area, and even later on, after he'd moved to Stonington and then to Cape Split, he every time he came to Maine, just about he'd stop off in Small Point, Pittsburgh, Bath, and do some painting.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is. It's magical.
I feel like this.
Carl,
Sorry.
A minute, let you know that it's almost 10:06. So.
Oh, geez. All right, well, let's move it on here. Good Lord.
We have time for some question and answers.
Okay, yeah. Let's go on to the next one.
Okay, this is that series I'm working on. I like to work in a series. Obviously. But this is 2 islands that you can't quite see. They're separated and they look like they're one island together.
Okay.
And this is big. It's like 3643, and that's where it fits on that Gloucester easel vertical. And I'm painting outside, and the cars are going by, and the water's rising, and you're looking at the easel. Is it gonna overtake me? But I really find it to be so much more enjoyable for me to work outside. I can see more, and a lot of times that I've noticed this year is that if you close one eye when you're working, you can put the thing together much more quickly, and then open both eyes and start working on the detail. You don't have to listen to me on that one, but it really does help when you're putting something together that's big.
Yeah.
I like the way the white clouds sort of like hold the island together. It's like it's like an arms that come around the island.
And I love the foreground rocks there.
Oh, those rocks are amazing.
Yeah, and that looks like where you've worked with your palette knife.
Yeah, the palette knife, yeah, definitely. And once like,
to literally carve them.
Yeah, it's the form, Yeah. You follow the form with the knife. Very much like you follow the form with a pastel stick, like to mimic the surface and mimic texture grass and softening in the clouds. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
This is another fantastic place overlooking Lazy Gut Island. And it's a 9 o'clock in the morning piece, so you have to be up early and you have to carry all your stuff out to it. It's probably about a mile hike in. And to take a 3643 painting on a panel is, you know, everybody knows it's a little heavy. So I've been screwing on little handles onto the painting, so that makes it easier to carry, you know, simple.
That's stunning. I just love all of the layers, the strata.
You see the way it's banded? There's a band. I love the bands. This is something that's been happening in the last 5 years. There's this particular banding composition within the composition. So a vignette of banding in a composition.
Yeah, and then the foundation of rock again.
Yep.
Just cool. Karen?
Okay, so now we're starting to see how things are put together.
Whoa.
What else is in the background of there? It looks like I've been goofing around. Oh yeah, I was drawing a mansard roof, trying to figure out how it works. I think that it's great to work with underpainting, and also there's this sort of chaos of doing an underpainting that's fun, and you don't take things for granted. You don't start from the top and paint straight down. You start from everywhere when you're doing an underpainting. You know, you're trying to shape there and this shape there, and basically you're just figuring out this basic shapes, and then you start working with the detail. You know, then you start breaking it apart, almost like the crystal aspects of it. And when you do the underpainting, then you can step back and you can say, wait a minute, this isn't what I wanted. You can go back later and just, you know, put your actual colors down and change the composition if you need to. But the idea of the underpainting is very much for pastel, you know, that idea of transparent colors and mimicking different types of colors by putting underpainting on and with other colors on top to give it more charge for your eye, more zoom, more zip. And so underpainting, leaving little pieces of the underpainting come through when you're finishing out with greens and blues. So I highly recommend underpainting. It makes it much more interesting and playful.
Yeah, this kind of, sorry. So reminded me of this, go.
You say it.
Well, I was going to say, it reminds me of a Stephen Pace of all things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I, you know, in some ways his paintings are all underpainting in a way.
Yeah. Also his brush.
Yeah.
You know?
His brush.
All right.
Wonderful. Thank you. Karen? How many more do we have here? I can't remember, but I do.
This is the painting that
That's the painting. That's the finished painting over the with the red underneath.
Oh wow!
So there's not a lot of underpainting coming through, but up along the top edge of the trees is more interesting. Maybe in the rocks, there's a little bit more color because, you know, that dull green really needs that red underneath it to make it more interesting. And I think it just has more a feeling of that you're including more, you know, you're sort of enriching it by leaving some of the underpainting sneaking out.
Yeah, wonderful. It's great to have the before and after.
This is
sorry about that. It's a little
Stonington?
trigger happy here.
Ooh.
This one's the next one.
This is over at Cape Rozier.
Right, and I think you told me this is Dan Hoffman's house.
Yes.
Is that right?
And you have to go look at it before someone buys it and turns it into, you know, beautifies it. It's got this very old farmy feel to it, and snuck in behind the house and worked on this painting. Sarah Farrager, if she's listening, this is a really good location for you. Just park at the beach, walk up the hill, sneak behind the house. This is a fantastic composition.
And for those who don't know, Daniel Hoffman was the equivalent of the U.S. Poet Laureate way back when, and was a wonderful poet and wrote some wonderful poetry about Maine. There's a poem called The Seals in Penobscot Bay that's really incredible. But there are many more too, and I highly recommend that you look up his work.
Okay. Here.
Cool.
Stonington Harbor. Motif number 1.
How many times have you done this?
I did it quite a few times in pastel. I mean, Henry Isaacs would take a subject like this and, you know, move the colors around into sort of like a glow. I think everybody does this view.
Yeah.
You know, Colin Page has done it. Everybody.
Alfred Chadbourne. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, you know, it's a remarkable spot. Reminds me of being in Italy in a Etruscan city looking down the valley, you know. It just has that feel, that depth, and this grand view of Idaho.
Yeah. Yeah, look at that.
I'm surprised more people don't go flying over the edge because, you know, they're like staring at it while they're driving by.
Yeah. Whoops. Yeah. No, it's such an iconic Maine view.
It's quite large too. It's about 60 inches long, isn't it, Tom? You can see it.
Yeah, 24 by 60.
Whoa. Yeah, that's grand.
And so this is a study of the smaller version of, and again, the vertical, this idea of, you know, almost like changing the way we look at landscape. And oftentimes, you know, you're sort of a passive landscape being horizontal and a more confrontational one being more vertical. But I like this idea. It's almost like reading a book, different placements of different parts of the composition, the sky, the islands, the water, a band, and then the different cottages down below, sort of nestled into the trees.
And I love that tree on the left there.
Yeah. And you know what's so fun about
it's like
that?
Corot or something.
You can just, the building up of color, and that if you could just take a look at that tree up close, it's just got layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of color built up on it, and transparent. So it has a nice feel to it. Yeah.
Wow. Karen?
I think this is the last slide.
Oh. Well, that was a wonderful tour.
If you have any more comments, Carl or Tom, we'll open it up to questions.
Okay.
Well, I had just a short quote from Tom that I really like that's on his website. He says, he seeks in his work to express that we are not mere observers of landscape, but also participants. I want to encourage the viewer to engage with landscape not as a passive backdrop of scenery, place names, or historic events, but as a live, wild, muscular, and ultimately unknowable, layered with history, yes, but also breathing, ever-changing, and seamless. Woo!
Packed a punch.
Yeah. I think you've succeeded in what you have sought. No, I think this has been great.
Yes.
Thanks to everybody for showing up.